The NFL is going international a little earlier than expected this season with their first ever game in Brazil between two household name franchises, the Eagles and the Packers. Was this going to be high scoring? Was it going to be sloppy? Was there going to be any travel lag? We'll find out as we break it down on Sunday Scaries with Bucks McGee. And welcome to Sunday Scares with Bucks McGee. In case you missed my notification in the Kansas City game, you noticed I maybe look like I'm flying solo. It's because Bucks McGee has a personal obligation for the first couple nights of this season. However, a very special guest host to break down these two opening night games, the host of the Breaking It Downs podcast, Mr. Greg. This is an interesting game, and we can take a lot of different interpretations of how to start with this. However, I think the most obvious one is the way it ended. Packers fans taking a collective gasp for air and praying that the next 3 days are not going to feel like an eternity, finding out what Jordan Love's future is for the rest of the season.
Yeah, as you said, there's so many angles to this game. I tried to watch as much quickly on that play. I think I'm going to guess Jordan Love's okay. When you watch the replays, it didn't look like it's a knee, it's a leg. He might have he took a shot. He might have had the wind knocked out of him. You would hope, as Packers fans, even the center left. I'm going to guess, knock on wood here for them. I would hope and think he's okay. And there was some mistakes made, but he definitely showed tonight that he is the guy. There's no doubt about it. They put up points left and right against what looked like an improved Philly D. So, but to that, I think and hope Jordan Love will be okay going into. Yeah, I'm going to guess that.
Well, one of my fantasy teams would be very appreciative of that sentiment. And like you said, it was rather unclear what the injury was. Like it wasn't totally visible whether it was leg, knee, Achilles, ankle, foot. Like whatever happened, it
Yeah,
wasn't sure. And when it first happened, like I kind of agree with you. It didn't look like it was that serious, but he did wind up getting assistance off the field, and the immortal Malik Willis rolls in to try and attempt a Hail Mary play.
you know what? Again, obviously I'm not the doctor. It's not a medical prognosis, but it didn't look lower body. Even though he got helped off, it just seemed like I think the concern I would think might be ribs. That could be it because he
Uh,
took a shot, and if you've ever broken ribs, it's debilitating. I'm not saying he did. He looked like he was moving on the sideline. Again, I would think without knowing. Like if they had another drive, I'm guessing Love was back in the game, but he got hurt with 5 seconds left. So
yeah.
yeah, I mean, attempting a Hail Mary pass, trying to heave it 50 yards when you just got hit in the sternum, that's
Oh,
not very
oh,
conducive.
a week ago.
Yeah. So
And I think the extra rub on this is the fact that they're not at home; they're in another country, so they can't just run him into the team facility to get an X-ray or a CAT scan or whatever the case may be. They probably got to wait a few days to get home, get him to the hospital, and then get the results. We're probably looking at Monday or Tuesday, and who knows if that'll endanger his status for next week and
well,
the
right
season
off the
beyond.
bat, I mean, the travel might be somewhat of an issue, but if he is able to get back with the team right away, they will have a couple extra days. So first inclination, I would guess he's not even definitely out for next week. Again,
Yeah.
that's the hope because again, it didn't look like it's some kind of leg. He was moving on the bench. It's just even if it was the wind knocked out of him or something like that, it's hard. These are 290, 300-pound men hitting you as hard as they can. I mean, yeah. So that's the hope.
Yeah. So I kind of had a very interesting interpretation of this game because I felt like it took a while for not just the Packers but the Eagles as well, for both teams to really get going. And I don't know whether they flew in late, maybe the travel affected them. it seemed like it took a while for them to get going. Eventually, they kind of shook the lead out a little bit. They went back and forth for a chunk of this game. It felt like whoever had the ball last was going to win. And then on top of that, the defenses really never got going. It seemed like the defenses didn't even get off the plane for most of the game.
You know what? I will give, and here's what I will say though. I'll give Philly's defense a little bit of credit here. And I don't even want to say that Green Bay played. They both made plays. There's a lot of skill position talent on both sides of that. But early in the game, where I think it was decided, Philly was terrible. I mean, they had the turnover. They had Green Bay was up 6-0 when it could have easily been 14, and I think that gave Philly a breather to grasp themselves. So I think Philly's defense, especially the one turnover where they got the ball, that I think it was like at the 15-yard line. They held them to 3 there. I thought that was a game changing. So yes, they gave up big plays, but again, you had Jaden Reed. They have a ton of speed. I mean, you have to feel good if you're a Green Bay fan. And even Philly with the issues they had, we saw the line issues, which we called last night. We thought might happen. The skill position players are amazing. So if they can just be decent and give those guys any time. So I kind of think, weird way, the Philly defense early in that game stabilized it because the offense almost lost the game for them. So again, it's 6 points. It's within one score. And all of a sudden Barkley makes that play and you're like, wow, the Eagles are ahead. So I saw promise in both.
And speaking of Reed, of course, the flags were a prominent prominent theme of this one. But speaking of Reed, that first play, I mean, he absolutely balled out in this game. And you had that first play that should have been a touchdown called back because not just the Packers, but the Eagles as well, nobody knew how to count helmets on a field.
Yeah, I can't recall. I'm sure it has, but when you're watching a game, you don't usually focus on that. I don't ever remember watching anything where both teams had 12 men on the field. Like, I agree. Yeah. I mean, even the announcing booth was like, do you recall that? I know I don't. And I've been watching football a darn long time. I don't think I've ever seen that.
Yeah. So as far as the weapons are concerned, so I mean, we just talked about the defense having some issues here and there, but as far as the offense is concerned, we'll stick with the Packers for a moment. Obviously, the big star was Reed. He was just force fed. Dobbs really didn't show up. Jacobs got going late, but Jacobs looked like he was washed up in a shell of his former self for half to 3/4 of this one.
Chase, you know what? Oh, sorry, go on.
They don't have any depth behind him. A young guy that he looked okay, but a no name, so probably a far two from Jacobs one. So and I don't necessarily and Musgrave is supposed to be this big prospect, and we really didn't see a ton of him. So aside from Reed, I mean, do you see any concerns with the Packers offense? I mean, we know they have explosive ability, but we didn't see a ton of actual production in this one.
I actually don't. And even to Jacob's point, honestly, the Philly defensive front is huge. I mean, they've drafted Georgia, like Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter. Like, they have these kids were dominant at Georgia. Men's top 5, top 10 picks. So I'm going to give the defensive line credit for Philly. Sometimes there wasn't much room early. I thought Jacobs in the second half, and even the one drive where Reed had the touchdown run, they ran the entire drive. Later in the game, they gave Jacobs even a little bit of a hole, and he went from, what do you have, 4 yards? I think he finished with over 80. So they were able to run the ball in the second half, which I think is the more important because that's how you ice games. There are a lot of mistakes made. So I think from the Packers standpoint, even the receivers like Dobbs, Wicks, a couple of those guys, the turf was ever apparent. Like, I heard them say at halftime, the coach even admitted, he said, yeah, it's a work in progress. A lot of these drops, missed plays, even Christian Watson, he did catch a touchdown. He made a couple nice plays, but I think it was the turf. I would leave that game as the Packers. They just have things to clean up. I would feel great as a Packers fan actually leaving that game. Because Philly has a ton of physical talent. They really do. So I can't come out of that game saying, oh, it's week 1, right? You showed you can move the ball. When they were clicking, they were moving it in will both ways in the air. And again, the drives, a couple of them were stalled because, the receiver slipped, made the timing off. So I'd feel great if I were a Packers fan. I really would.
And clicking despite a one-dimensional offense for most of the game.
Like I said, though, when they were doing what they were, they protected well at times. I honestly, for the Packers, assuming Love's okay, that's a tough game. Don't forget, we talked about it last night. These first teamers don't get any reps nowadays. So you're going for them to click as well as they did, to move the ball as they did. I think it's a great thing for them.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna add too. It's like okay for Packers fans to be okay with this, assuming Jordan Love is fine.
Yeah, I mean, if that's an issue, that's a big issue. But play like just the play aside, yeah, Love left some plays on the field too. There were a couple turnovers that they could have played better, but I didn't see anything that like he had regret. Like even the play, it was kind of a broken play when he hit Reed for a long touchdown. Was it 50 yards plus 70 yards? I think it was the longest of Love's career. That showed maturity. He rolled out, he hit him on the run. I saw nothing out of that other than mistakes that will happen and can be corrected. So, yeah, I don't take any negative out of their offense at all.
Of the weapons that maybe didn't have a great game in this one, which one do you think is most important to get their wheels under them going forward? Is it Wicks? Is it the running back depth behind Jacobs? Is it Musgrave?
Honestly, I think the biggest strength of the Packers, if I compare them to most other teams, even teams of star receivers, I won't even say, I don't want to say it's a concern. The secondary receivers, but we don't even know who's the number one most nights, and that's a positive thing. They throw to 4 guys on the outside. Those guys are going to make plays. So where Reed did it tonight, that was like the end of last year. Wicks came out of nowhere making those type of plays late. I think it's a collective, the depth that they have at the position. That's really it. I think that's a strength. And even the running game, the backup running back tonight, I mean, he did a great job, especially in that one drive. So, if anything, the running back depth. But like I said, I leave that game thinking they're loaded. You saw the athleticism, the speed, and a couple of drives that faltered. It was Philly making plays, number one, or the turf. One play, I remember a third down, I think it was to Dobbs, that he technically dropped it, but it's because he slipped. He made his cut, then he gets back up. So I didn't see any, you know what I mean? I'd feel good if I was a Packer fan. As a G-Men fan, I wish we had that talent across the board. Yeah.
As it's funny how a soccer pitch can be so much different than a football field.
But you remember what I'm saying? How many plays? And I'm not saying it did happen to Philly as well. I just remember more of them on the Green Bay side where play was disrupted because the receiver slipped, cut off the route. So even the drop, he gets up. The whole timing's off, right? Dobbs is expecting to cut, the ball's there. He slips and gets up. Well, now it hits his hands. It's no one's fault. It's the pitch.
Yeah.
The Brazilian pitch.
Kicking it over to the Eagles now. We'll start off, let you beat your chest a little bit, calling a big performance from Barkley this season. Did not miss a beat in making Eagles faithful going to start to woo over him earlier on the season. 3 touchdown performance. Not a ton of yards, but he was used not exactly in the most traditional way. So I don't know if maybe Kellen Moore is just having fun with the new toy in the toy box and experimenting a little bit.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to put it. And the most impressive to me, and I don't mean when he was with the Giants, not that they didn't have protection. So, the play he catches the first touchdown out of the backfield where he makes a great catch, a lot of those plays weren't available because the Giants' offensive line didn't protect long enough to let him get into the route. So, that you combine that with, again, the other skill position players. So I'm not patting myself on the back. What you remember my point last night was he's never had anywhere near this talent around him. So the whole game plan against the Giants for years was stop Barkley. Go ahead and try that. You have AJ Brown who busts. You have Devontae Smith who keeps getting better by the day, as far as I'm concerned. So he's finally like on this team with a bunch of weapons. It's like, wow, he actually has some freedom. And I think you're seeing, I mean, don't kid yourself. He is still supremely talented. I don't doubt that for 1 second. He's in a much better spot offensively now.
I do have a one point to ask you about regarding Devontae Smith, but real quick, who who were you more impressed with tonight? Was it Jaden Reed on the Packers side, or was it Saquon?
Okay, tough way to answer that because I'm not saying you expect 3 touchdowns. So Saquon in my mind is that good that's the type of performance you can get every day. The only reason I'll say Jaden Reed is just because he seemed to be like take a full step. Like, correct if I'm wrong, if you watched him tonight, did he not look like an A1 receiver in the league tonight?
Oh yeah.
That's so. Let me term it that way. I kind of expect Barkley again, not 3 touchdowns again, but I think we had all forgotten how good Barkley is. He just has an opportunity to show it, and I'm dead serious. Giant drives over the last, and if you can't tell one out there, I'm a Giant fan. The Giants went 3 and out a million times, so he's on the field more. He's going to see the more opportunities he gets, the less double, triple, the 8-man boxes he sees. That's what he can do. So to answer your question, I expect stardom out of Barkley. Jaden Reed just seems to be that new kid off of tonight, at least. That like, oh boy, yeah, they couldn't guard him at times.
And as far as Devontae Smith is concerned, he kind of came on late in this one. And to me, in the last couple of years since AJ Brown's been in town, it's kind of a little frustrating trying to predict which receiver is going to get the bulk of the carries because AJ Brown's such a ball whore. Jalen just feeds him nonstop. So sometimes you're like, okay, Devontae Smith is still out there. Is he going to get the ball at all? And then all of a sudden he starts getting the ball at the end of the game as the Phillies driving the field to kind of close this one out. How do you kind of forecast their balancing of these 2 receivers? They're both ace, WR1 type of guys. Like, how are they supposed to keep them both happy?
You know what? Devontae Smith to me it's going to sound odd saying this. He might be the key to the whole offense because I know what I'm getting. Like, there was the one play today. Did you see they diagrammed it? And it was perfect. It was a great play call. I think it was the tight end went to the flat. AJ Brown went deep. And Devontae Smith is so smooth. He's such a great athlete, great speed, but he can run routes. I mean, he makes a cut. He slit into the open area between the flat, Brown going deep, and it was like a 20-yard gain. I think Devontae Smith is the most malleable, flexible receiver out of that he can do everything. I mean, he just makes cuts that are different. Well, don't get me wrong, Brown's a beast, physical specimen, but Devontae Smith is the guy. Like, he's slithery. I honestly think you're going to see a huge jump from him, and I don't think, especially with Barkley being there now, you have 3 alphas, and I won't even call Devontae the alpha. There are 3 stars there. I don't think it's going to be an issue at all. I think that play call, in essence, because Brown had beat them deep earlier. Remember that. The coverage shaded towards Brown deep, and the same vice versa. They're going to open up lanes for each other. I think if Philly's line holds up, I hate to say it, that position talent it's scary, the skill position talent. But Devontae to me is the guy who can take it to the next level because I don't think we've seen the best of him yet, and I think that's on the way. He makes everything look easy.
And you're big, and we know you're big on Jahan Dotson, who really was not seen in this one. So that's even something else that Kellen Moore hasn't even figured out how to use him yet, and that's another guy that can get some third down conversions, possession type of plays.
Oh, he can burn it too. I mean, when he was at Penn State, even his rookie year with Washington, he's a player. There's no 2 ways about it. But don't forget, he just got in the building a couple of weeks ago. So, but yeah, when that's your 3rd receiver, that's a damn talented trio. Yeah, I mean, really talented.
The other thing with the offense, and this is something that kind of drove me a little crazy last season because everyone lost their mind over the tush push. And I think of it, I'm like, it's just a QB sneak. There's nothing special about this. You just have a quarterback who's 6'5" and a center who's, 350, 400 pounds and, a seasoned veteran. Like, there's nothing special about this. It's just a QB sneak. It just looks crazy because they would go for fourth and short on the 50, and the quarterback had about 15, 17, whatever it was, touchdowns by season's end. But to that point, uh, my despise of the treatment of it aside, uh, they had some issues in this
Yep.
one, getting used to the new line and working with the new center. They had a couple missed handoffs. So is this kind of automatic play from last season um, not not going to have the same success rate?
Well, I don't think it can have the same success. It doesn't mean it won't be successful at all, but you can't. I think the thing, in today's, I always use this, the fantasy football era, people don't realize like the importance of the offensive line. You can't replace Jason Kelsey with, he doesn't walk off the field and you take some big heavy guy. Oh well, this guy can do the same. No, Kelsey was extremely athletic, extremely strong. There's a reason he's in Hall of Famer. Their center tonight, that can improve. There's no doubt about it. But you did see, I mean, the one he snapped that early in the game. We talked about that play earlier. Hurts wasn't ready for the snap. They give up a fumble. The one of the tush pushes didn't go anywhere. The play at the end of the game, that was a debacle. You saw when they tried to do it at the goal line, Barkley fell on the ball. You can't expect it to be as good without Kelsey because, to your point, it can be simple, but it's not that simple when you have a guy as good as Kelsey. He makes that, the timing, the strength. So, but on the same token, they pointed out in the broadcast tonight, Hurts is extremely strong for a quarterback himself. Kid's squatting 500 pounds. I think they can make it work again, but it's going to take time. Again, they've had the same center for how many years was he there? 10 plus years. The timing, the sequencing, the calls. I think it's to be expected, and they got away with it tonight. And I think logically that would improve, right? So,
And speaking of Jalen Hurts' development, there's been a lot of chatter based on the way last season ended, as far as doubting him. I mean, he's this immensely talented player, and the way last season went towards the end and in the playoff game, there's been a lot of questioning him as far as, okay, maybe is he the guy? Did they just catch lightning in a bottle with the Super Bowl run? Did you see anything out of Jalen Hurts to make you think that he's back on track, or maybe he's still got some learning curves to figure out?
I saw both. I saw both. I thought he did a great job. Well, let me start with the bad. The fumbled snap that he had, that was not his fault. That was a center communication. I'm not. But he had that interception he threw. They were up, or they up five at the time, regardless of what they're up. If they take a field goal there, you cannot throw that pass. That's a flag football. Throw it in the air and hope somebody catches it. Inexcusable. It's those type of plays where he's at the point now he shouldn't be making those. That's not to cut on him. That's why he got benched for Tua when he was at Alabama. That's why he eventually lost the job. It was plays like that. He had another one that could have been picked. So he had a couple plays that scratch your head. They'll go look at the tape. It's like, Jalen, you can't do that. Like you're too experienced now. On the flip side, he's gritty. I like the last drive. He got out of the pocket for number first downs. He can throw the ball, but I think he's still, it's a mixed bag. Let's put it that way. Because if he makes those plays over the course of the year, that changes a season, and it could have tonight. So I think we got to remember he still is a pretty fairly young quarterback. But I saw both. There were things that you'd say he can be really good, and a couple things I saw. It's like, geez, Jalen, you cannot do that. Really, I mean that one in particular. It's also knowing the timing of the game. You take three there, you're putting them in a huge hole. That gave Green Bay a shot. That to me was completely inexcusable, and it wasn't a physical talent thing. It was a maturity thing. Like you can't throw that ball. So
How much do you think is physical improvements and growing pains versus mental up here?
I think the talent is there. I don't think that's a question. I mean, he's got stronger and stronger, physically. He's got more zip on the ball. He can obviously run. I think it is a mental, it's a processing of the game, and I think he's capable of. But we do see a lot of quarterbacks in history who have all the talent in the world for whatever reason. I'm not saying he's going to be that because we've obviously seen great moments. He was inches away from winning a Super Bowl. I think the upside is definitely there, but the bad side you saw at the end of last year, which was somewhat himself, it was. I think you saw a little of that tonight as well. That has to get cleaned up. That you'll lose a season because of that.
And the other thing, of course, as far as hot seats, if you can say that, is we got to look at the coaches real quick. Now, Matt LaFleur is someone who was handed this high-powered offense in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers in the middle of his MVP years, and then he gets to groom Jordan Love as his heir apparent. So, and nothing's really changed a whole lot for the Packers. They're still just having competitive seasons. Maybe they get in the playoffs. They don't go very far. They're not winning Super Bowls. So nothing so far has really changed a lot, regardless of whether it was Rodgers or Love, as far as the ultimate prize in LaFleur's camp. And then Sirianni probably took way more heat than Hurts did, the way last season ended, and they kind of lost. You almost argue maybe lost control of the locker room or what have you. So how do you kind of use this game, this opening game for these two teams as a litmus test for the two coaches?
Well, I'll start with Sirianni. If you saw the end of last year, and I will say this because I'll use my Giants as an example. Philly on paper last year was 1,000 times better than my Giants. They came into the Meadowlands. I don't know, it was the last week, the week prior, and we absolutely smoked them. I mean, it was insane. We were up 30 points in them one. Hurts played terrible that game as well, but that's where the team, like it honestly, it really did have to look like the team. They had no answers. I'm putting that more on Sirianni. They couldn't block anymore. It was a debacle. And that's where Sirianni, even towards Hurts, still is a coach. So I think it's more important for Sirianni that they need early success because they did have an epic collapse last year. That was a 10-1 team. And you remember the playoff game in Tampa. They could have lost by 50. I mean,
Yeah.
But sometimes you can see the body language of a team. I don't want to say the team quit, but their body language told you, even in that Giant game, they're not going to win again. Like, they're not going to. So I think it was much bigger again, the Eagles need a good start for Sirianni because the Hounds will come after him if not. I think for LaFleur, again, I saw nothing out of this game that tells me they're not on the right track, that Love isn't. Again, they faced a talented Philly team week one. So LaFleur, I give him an A. Again, they're gonna have an issues. There's Love's still young squad, but Sirianni's is on the hot seat this year. So for him, it's a big win.
What are your thoughts on the Kellen Moore hire as far as trying to recapture some of the magic they had with their two coordinators, the Super Bowl run, Steichen on the offense, Gannon on the defense? Is Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio the right kind of combination to reclaim some of that next level down hierarchy from Sirianni?
Early indications would say yes. I will say, well, first off, the defense in particular, when they had the late season swoon, the defense was horrendous the end of last year. The secondary couldn't stop anything. And listen, that's personnel as well. A lot of their secondary guys had gotten older, but it's also schematically. I mean, they were porous. So I think Fangio and listen, Kellen Moore, he comes from a program when he played. There's a passing offense. I think it was a good hire and it was a desperate one because there's no way, as much talent they have, that they shouldn't be a dynamic. There's no way they shouldn't with all that talent. So I do think they were good hires, and I think he had to go a different direction because that was one of the worst. I don't try to dump on coaches, but that was bad. The team had kind of quit on them last year. So, and you heard the rumblings, like the players arguing, what are we doing? You heard there was disconnect between Hurts and Sirianni. I don't think they hate each other, but that wasn't all just that. The old saying, when there's smoke, there's fire. There
Mhm.
was clear as day. That team is ready. Really, though. And Hurts, to his credit, and Sirianni said, listen, we'll piece things together. But there were real issues there. And I think offensively, especially the schematics was like, well, we need to do something. So Kellen Moore is a bright young, it was. I think it was a good hire. Whether it works out over the course of the season, who knows? But you had to do something different.
I do get a kick out of the fact that this is someone who's had 3 OC jobs now in the league, and all 3 of them you could argue serving under a head coach that at one point or another has been on his own hot seat, and he continues to go to another team to pick up a new job instead of being the heir apparent like most hot name coordinators are. Like
Yeah,
he's under McCarthy, then he's under Brandon Staley, who was a disaster, and now he's
well,
under Sirianni, who had a lot of pressure last year, like you discussed.
Brandon Staley. I was just going to bring that up with the Chargers. I don't think I've ever seen bad in-game decisions more than Staley. I get being aggressive to some degree. The stuff he did was ludicrous. They were so loosey goosey with everything. There was no conservativeness whatsoever. I think him and Staley were like, like you can have 2 good people, but when they're in a relationship, they're terrible together. I don't think there were checks and balances between those 2.
Yeah.
So I do think Kellen Moore has a bright offensive mind. I think Staley was far more the reason why the Chargers didn't win as much as they should have. But I think Moore does have a very bright offensive mind. So
Let's switch gears for a second because Bucks McGee will retake the seat beside me for Sunday. But before you part, what are your kind of thoughts, especially as you get ready to do your own podcast for the rest of week 1? What are you looking forward to on Sunday? What are the games that kind of stand out as like this is something that could really mean something for the season?
I think the first thing from a macro perspective, you want to call that, is you have some exciting rookie quarterbacks coming in the league. I think for a while you've had probably a third of the teams in the league for a good while that have had terrible QB play. He's Caleb Williams, Jalen Daniels, even Bo Nix. To be honest, he's still Denver's offense looked like it was out of 1927 the last couple of years. And understand sometimes you have to play that way to your talent, but I think number one, just as an NFL fan, you're having 3 offenses that were stagnant, boring to watch. So that right off the bat, you have exciting new talent, and you'll see more of it. Drake May, I think, eventually will have the patch job. So that would be my first thing. Number 2, I think when we talked a little bit last night, once you get outside of the Chiefs and a handful of teams, again, like I can make a case for probably 80% of the team's best case scenario, including my Giants, who we alluded to. If things broke right, could they make the playoffs? Sure. So I think that I think in the league nowadays with teams that had downtrodden coaches, offenses, a lot of new coaches out there, I think you're going to see some fresh new blood, new approaches. So what we've known of some teams in the past, Chicago not having QB play, this team, I think you're going to see a lot of new things we haven't seen out of traditional stereotypes we have out of franchises. Jim Harbaugh on the sidelines in San Diego, or now the LA Chargers, whatever the heck they are. They're still San Diego.
I still call them San Diego too.
Yeah, it's anyway. I can go on for 2 years about that type of stuff, but I do think on that note, to me, like that's an exciting, a lot of new coaches, a lot of new blood, and a lot of franchises who have been not only bad but boring for a while. I think you might see a changing of the guard as far as that's concerned. Outside the Chiefs, we know what the Chiefs are.
Which of these young quarterbacks do you think is the most ready to have an immediate Pro Bowl level impact on their new team?
Listen, I think. Well, the 2 of them in particular, Caleb. It's not rocket science saying this. I do think off the bat this year, I hate to say it, I think Jaden Daniels, I think has a shot to. I think he has a shot. I think Caleb's going to be good as well. But I think they're really going to let Jaden kind of air it out. You're probably going to see some missteps along the way, but I get the feeling they're gonna let him loose and they're going to feature the offense around him. So I would think numbers wise, experience wise, he'd be my pick for this year. And I think him and Caleb will be an interesting comparison as they go in their career because I think they're both going to have very good careers.
I could see that because with Caleb, not only is there the pressure of being the number one pick, but there's also an aura of being the missing piece. Like Chicago's defense, maybe it's not as great as years past, but it's still pretty solid. They've got even last year they've done nothing but add weapons this season. But even last season, they had running backs, they have a decent tight end, they got weapons down the field. So not just being a number one pick, but
Yep.
Caleb also has the aura of being a missing piece.
And I the one thing, and this is not I'm not detracting on Caleb, but I do have to add this. Listen, it's the NFL. He's not going to walk in the league. I'll use an analogy last year at USC. And again, I'm not blaming him. Their defense was a sieve. They were giving up 720 points a game. But you did see him. He got erratic. He did not play well himself towards the end of that year. There is a lot of pressure on him. They're not going 15-2. So the point is, he's going to have a learning curve where I do think there is Daniels is expected to be the man as well. But I don't think there's actually going to be as much pressure on him right off the bat. I mean, Washington hasn't won a playoff game in I think it's 20 years now. So, they're excited. They'll welcome the bumps. So I think for that reason, just year one, I'm going to take Daniels to have the more prolific numbers, if I can say that.
Yeah, my brain missed the synapse and forgot to make the comparison I was trying to make as far as the pressure on Caleb versus your point to Daniels. Just there's nothing to lose.
They're just excited.
No one expects anything from Washington. Just let it rip.
They're just excited down there. That's it. Where the Bears, and you hear the pun, I understand it. The Bears have a lot of talent. They were better than their record last year. Don't forget in Chicago, they're expecting this team to make the playoffs. Whatever they tell you, oh no, they are. Like they absolutely are. Like, there's no two ways about it. With the talent they've brought in, the wide receiver position, they drafted Odunze as well. I think there's more pressure there, and these kids are going to struggle. There's no doubt about it. They're going to. I saw Peyton Manning today. They were joking with him on the Pat McAfee show, and they were saying Peyton was really interested in listening, saying, "Listen, these kids are going to make these mistakes. You have to let them play." And he said jokingly, he said, "Hopefully one of these guys breaks my interception record when I was a rookie." They quickly corrected him and said, "No, it's impossible, Peyton, because you have the record for interceptions in a 16-game season. It's now 17." He laughed, but the point was, he said, "Listen, they're going to make mistakes. Let them play. Let them play through it. Let them learn." So,
as a Colts fan, that's always my preferred method as well.
but think about it, right? He literally has the record, and if you went off the 1 year and you had insane expectations that they were supposed to be some playoff team that year, his career could have been totally different, right?
Yeah.
Let him play through it. Let him learn.
Yeah. They just had an offensive line. It would have been fine.
But you get the point though. It was just today I was listening to him say that. And he's right. So I think in Daniel's case, there's not even a question of. I mean, sure, things break right for Washington. I don't think the NFC is great. NFC East, granted, Philly's skill position looks damn good, but things break right. Could they possibly? Sure, they got a decent D, but no one in Washington, no one in DC thinks they're a Super Bowl contender this year. Or I think the Bears, I think in Chicago, they're thinking things break right. They could actually be that. So,
yeah. Aside from the Lions, there's opportunities in that division.
Yeah, I think the Bears will be good, but do I think they're going 12-5? No, that's it's not going to happen. It's still you have to remember, no matter how good these kids were in college, and they were. They're facing guys bigger, stronger, windows they're used to throwing into. That guy would be 3 yards open. These defenders are much fat, right? It's an adjustment that they can't learn until they actually go through it. They can't. There's no training camp that does it. It's through those mistakes where they realize, oh my gosh, every guy I'm playing on D is the best guy that was on the field I've ever seen. There's 11 of them, right?
Yeah. Well, Sunday fast approaches, and Buccs McGee will rejoin me to break down all the action. Greg, from Breaking It Down, thank you so much for filling in for the couple nights here. And as they say on Hot Ones, this camera, that camera over there. Tell the people what's going on in your life and give us a final thought on this Packers-Eagles game from Brazil as you take us off air.
What's going on? Well, obviously I'm a huge football fan, college and pro. This is the first full weekend of both that I gladly is one of the rare weekends I don't have probably hardly any plans other than to watch football. And that is so freaking amazing to me. I truly, I love these weekends, especially, I just love them. The Brazil game, you know what I come out of the Packers-Eagles? Listen, we remember for years Roger Goodell's pushing the international thing. If you're someone in Brazil trying to get into football, they gave you a product that was worth watching. So, right, was that not entertaining? Not every game is like that. Tennessee Bears week 1. Well, maybe it's more exciting this year. That wouldn't have been that. So I think from the NFL's perspective, they hit a home run down there tonight because they had some big time players make big time plays. So good on the NFL.